last episode, we kind of finished up where God had spoken to you about pastoring. Yeah. You had been the pastor really for about 4 years, and then she was waiting for an associate to come because doctor was traveling. Sure. And God spoke to her audibly and said, feed my sheep, pastor. And so now the church was in Enterprise Circle in Temecula. And then y'all had, Dad, I know Dad had talked about building a building, and that you knew God had another place. That wasn't the...
And Ed was looking for property, and Ed had considered several different locations, and he found one. And while they were negotiating, he didn't want to renew our lease at our current building. And so we moved into a school just for a few short months. And then he secured the land that we're built on today.
Yes, and that's kind of borderline Marietta, Wildemar.
It is. It's right on the edge.
And at that point, there probably, I remember Stephen saying there wasn't a whole lot.
It wasn't developed. It was all vacant. Yeah, it was vacant land.
So from the time God spoke to you in the late 80s, now moving into buying and purchasing this property, around what time was that?
We bought this in about 98, 99, somewhere around in there.
And there's a precious story with the property.
Well, when he found the property, God dealt with him real strong about that. And after we had built on it, a lady came to our offices one day, and she was probably in her 70s, 80s, and she told the story. She said her and her family had owned that property years ago when she was a little girl. Her mother, it was around the 1900s, the turn of the century, right after she had this one daughter that was grown now. She had come down with tuberculosis, and they used to put them in a I forgot the name, a sanatorium or something like that, to where they sent the sick to die. And because it was contagious, they kept them apart from the rest of the community. So her mother was sent there to die, and it was during the time the Azusa Street revival. Oh, wow. And so healing was being emphasized. And a traveling minister came to where she was hospitalized and prayed for her, and God raised her up.
Wow.
Healed her, raised her up. And so she was the daughter of a Methodist minister, this woman who owned the property. And she had really her relationship with God had not been real hot. And so she had gotten the tuberculosis, but then God had healed her, so then she rededicated herself to the Lord. And this was the property that they had, and it used to be pecan groves. And so this daughter that was grown and in the office said, I remember when I was a little girl, my mother would walk the property and dedicate it to God and say, God, use this property for your glory. So that was about 80 years later. Then we come, and God had told her, I'll build a church there. Wow. And so about 80 years later, then we end up coming and building the church. So the woman grew up on that property, and she was thrilled to see that it come to pass, and we were thrilled to hear the story because, of course, we didn't know that history of it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I know in seeing old pictures and hearing everyone talk about, the property, and there wasn't anything on it really. I think there was an old house up on a hill,
an adobe house.
And that this property, it's not like she had developed it or anything, and so
it was farmed. You know.
Yes, and so I know when y'all had found the property and wanted to build, not quite in the position to build, but financially, but God, creative ideas, divine ideas, y'all had decided to put up a tent.
Well, we put up a tent simply to have a fresh oil conference because we were meeting in the school, and the school was not suitable for a week-long conference. So Ed just said, why don't we just put up a tent? Because I had done tent ministry, before I pastored.
Yes.
So he said, why don't we put up a tent just to hold the conference? And so we got a 2-week permit from the city to put up the tent. And at the end of the 2 weeks, our congregation loved it so much, I said, I want us to stay here, not go back to the school. Then we're on our own property.
That's right.
We're not paying rent, at a different location. And so Ed said no, he didn't want to do that, because he wanted everything, I understand, he wanted a nice building, but if there's not a building there, he wasn't the one having to set up and tear down every Sunday. It was the congregation, because he was traveling.
And at that point, I know some of our staff members now, they were already on staff, and they revisit that every so often to remind us.
Yeah, because Ed was gone, and so he would walk into it being done, so he was fine with it. But the congregation was doing the work, and they said, we want to stay here. And when I said, why don't we stay in the tent? He said, no, I don't do tent. And I said, well, I think we are. I said, the congregation wants to do it. And, he left that to me because he knew I was the pastor. So he did leave that decision to me. Of course, if he would have said no, I wouldn't have pushed it. But I said, no, the congregation really wants to do this. So he said, well, financially it would be a help not to have to pay another location. So we did it, and we stayed there for 3.5 years. But you understand, we're in Southern California. That's very doable. And the city only gave us a 2-week permit. So, and in fact, we hadn't really considered staying there, but the tent company said to us, when they came out and they set up the tent, and we called them, we told them, the conference was over, they can come get the tent, and they said, why don't you buy it?
Oh, wow.
And so usually, why would a tent company do that? But that's what got us thinking. And Ed said, no, we don't need the tent. And he said, well, why don't you, just leave it up and use it? And Ed told him, well, the city will only give us a 2-week permit. And the tent company said, let us handle the city. So they went to the city, and the city said as long as they show building progress, they can leave the tent up.
Wonderful.
So we left it up for 3.5 years, and then another church, I think it's like a Seventh-day Adventist, about a couple miles down the road, saw us do that, and so they came and did that, and so it started a precedence in the city for different churches doing that, and it was a blessing.
Well, I know too, hearing now, being in this community, and you tell people, because we're still there on that property, the building's up, but you tell people what church, of course this was long before I was here, but you tell people where you go to church, oh, that's the church on Palomar that had a tent. Everybody knows it. And so it's no surprise that God would do something to really cause the church to stand out in the community and be recognized in the community, because it was such a small community at the time.
And when you see a tent, you think circus, you think something is going, because we had several tents up. It wasn't just one.
And I know there was many people that came at that time of the tent that joined the congregation. So
it never stunted the growth.
No.
All of our people stayed, and it did grow. But then that was the plan of God for us.
It was that season, and so I remember hearing Dad say how the property where the building was going to be built, the portion of the property would talk to him.
Well, while we were in the tent, Ed was really antsy to get that building up and going, and so there was tumbleweeds and old dried out weeds, that because we had 22 acres total at that time, and so and financially it didn't look like there was a feasible way for it to happen. And so he said he would be out there, and those bushes would talk to him and say, we've been here for thousands of years, we're going to be here for another thousands of years. And it would just be a reminder that this project is not moving as quickly as he wanted. So he would tell Stephen, go get the bush hog and come down here and mow these weeds down. He said, they're not talking to me anymore.
That's right.
So he would answer it, so to speak. When it looked like it wasn't happening, he would answer it and say, it'll all come to pass. And of course, in 2002, in October of 2002 is when we moved into our building. And it was exactly 11 years later after we started the church. And then Dad Hagen came in 2003 and dedicated it. And that was the last full week crusade he did in the United States before he went home to be with the Lord. So we're glad that he got to be there and dedicate that for us.
It's quite a history. I know that we can look at this portion and really recognize that taking steps, God's already prepared some things, and you've got to take your steps of faith for Him to be able to bring into your life what He's prepared. And then to not let things talk to you. Don't let...
Well, and you can have a plan in mind, but God sent us through different routes than what Ed had initially wanted. But you have to be open.
That's good.
You can't
good.
decide this is the only way it can be accomplished. It can be accomplished
And
several
he thought things
ways.
weren't moving forward.
Yes, when they really were.
When they really were, and he had to do something to answer that.
Yes.
So for your own life, you'll have to do some things. The fight of faith is the fight of words, and do some things to answer when it doesn't look like it's moving forward, and God is working on it and moving things forward. You're going to have to answer the natural, so to speak.
Because it's through faith and patience.
That's right.
You inherit the promises. Because without patience, faith will quit on you.
That's right.
And so that's what, that's just part of the family process of the local church.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it was hearing clearly from the Spirit of God and stepping out in faith that we're even here, and the faithfulness of Dr. Dufresnes and Pastor Nancy to not quit. Never quit, never give in to circumstances, and also instilling that in, not just in us as the kids, but they've instilled that in our congregation.
Right.
And so our congregation has a no quit attitude, and no, spirit of faith. About our there's a spirit of faith about our congregation because of the steps of faith and the way that Doctor and Pastor have just lived faith in every arena of life, not just in finances, not just with a church, but every arena. And so we've taken our example and moving forward. And
we're now where God said. He said, go and get in position for the last day revival.
Yes.
So now we're in position, and we've got a congregation trained, and all of us in unity ready to go. And we could say we've been experiencing revival in our own congregation for years now, but I'm just saying that now we're ready to even go further.
That's right.
Yeah.
Amen. So we're glad you could join us today, and we look forward to being with you next time on Dufresnes Faith Journal.
Put them on there so they don't fall off. You're going to put your choo-choo train right there? Here. Put him on there. That's a good one.
Hey, that's a dad and that's a mommy.
And he does. Who's this? Who's this?
Santa.
Santa. You gonna tell me a secret? A baby scooter? A BB-8?
What? The BB-8 scooter.
A BB-8 scooter. Bubby, what do you want?
An airplane that flies.
An airplane that flies remote control?
No,
Do you
no.
know how? Wait a minute. Do you know how to fly a remote control airplane? Got it? Let's see.
Nanny, last time me and Buddy went through that, and then we saw a snowman. And you live in that
Yeah,
one.
that one.
Are you going in that one?
Yeah, would that be a good one to live in? Let's go see the jungle room. You ready?
Yay!
There's a hippo.
There's a deer over here.
What else do you see?
A deer and an elephant. See? This one is so cool, Nanny.
What?
Cool.
Is it cool? Yeah?
I love this.
You love this? Here you go, right here.
Nanny, is that a church?
That's a church. Okay.
Bye.
Tell it bye.
Do it.
Merry Christmas!
Thank you for watching today's show. Be sure to check out all the latest episodes on our YouTube page. For more information, follow us on Facebook or visit our website at dufresnesministries.org.